Good evening, everybody, and very big welcome to the Fathering Project and to a special series we're doing this month, in the month of August, on understanding bullying and cyberbullying. Tonight, we'd like to welcome you to the webinar on understanding bullying and how to respond with your children. And we're very excited to have with us tonight the Senior Researcher at the Fathering Project, Erin Erceg. Now, before we get started, I'd just like to draw your attention to a few housekeeping rules. You will see on your panel that you have the opportunity here on the far right to actually send us a message anytime during the webinar. Please type your message and send, and we'll be collating any questions that we get, and we will have a question session at the second half of the webinar. The second thing I'd like to draw your attention to is if you'd like to make your screen larger or smaller, there is a moving bar that you have that is halfway up. You can actually hook onto the moving bar and you can scroll it up or down to make the top or bottom of your screen larger or smaller. That depends on if you'd like to increase the size where you can see the host or the slides. The final thing I'd like to mention is that if you do have trouble hearing this at any point in time, please revert back to your invitation. It has information there on how you can link into this webinar using your mobile phone for sound. So before we get started, let me tell you a little bit tonight about our presenter and senior researcher, Erin Erceg. Erin is currently the lead researcher at the Fathering Project, and she's an honorary research associate with the Telethon Kids Institute at the University of Western Australia, and she's the National Director of the Friendly Schools Project. Congratulations on all of that, Erin. Over the last 18 years, Erin has been a speaker, a trainer, an author in all areas of child and youth, social, emotional well-being. And during this time, her years in child health promotional research projects with Telethon Kids Institute and the University of Western Australia, Edith Cowan University and Curtin University, has provided her with a wealth of evidence-based content and experience in this subject. As one of our researchers, as an author and a lead trainer for the Friendly Schools Initiative, Erin has been directly involved in research and education around social and emotional learning and bullying reduction in schools, and has worked extensively with primary and secondary schools both here in Australia and overseas. So we are very, very lucky to have you with us tonight, Erin. I'd like to welcome you and thank you in advance and hand over the panel to you to take us through the webinar tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz, for your generous introduction, and I'm really looking forward to being able to have this month of discussing bullying and sharing our knowledge amongst the parents, as well as having these live webinars where you can ask questions and gain the information that you would like to. What we're going to be looking at tonight is a range of different areas around bullying, but also particularly around how to speak to your children about bullying. Regardless of what age they are, all children need to learn about social behaviours and learn about relationships with others. These are very important skills. So I'm going to walk you through tonight some skills and some tips to explain bullying to your children. There's also some, I guess, some ages and stages that you need to be aware of that we're going to touch on, where social relationship issues can be an issue, where aggressive behaviours may be kicking in, but the sorts of things that you can look out for in those areas of the stages of development with your children and what you can do at those times. Also going to look at why young people use bullying behaviours and a bit of understanding around this so that we can then see how we can reduce these behaviours and also how we can avoid them. Also, what we need to do to prevent young people's involvement in bullying and getting involved. When you have a look at the evidence, and we're going to have a look at that tonight, you'll see that really there's potential for any young person to be involved in bullying behaviour if they are lacking the skills to get what they want, or they're having difficulty in relationships, or they're struggling with their emotions. So we need to have a look at how we can prevent young people getting involved in those behaviours, plus how to respond if your child is being bullied or is a witness to bullying as well. So first of all, we'll start off with just having a look at actual bullying behaviour and what it is so that you can clearly explain it to young people. It's really important that they understand what bullying behaviour is. Now, they will learn about this at school and they'll learn the definition, but it's really important that you have these discussions at home as well. Bullying behaviour actually is an act of aggression, so it sits under the family of behaviours within aggression. And aggression can be verbal, physical or psychological in nature, and the intention of it is to cause physical, psychological or emotional harm to another person. So bullying sits within this group, but there are a few particular aspects of bullying that are different to just regular aggression. So let's have a look at the definition, and this is will help you to be able to discuss with your young people, your children or your teenagers, what bullying is, how to recognise it, and then how to manage those sorts of behaviours if they should encounter them. So the key words that I'm going to highlight for you is that bullying is a repeated behaviour. It's not just a one-off. It's not someone that's done something mean or aggressive to a person once. It's actually something that happens again and again. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same behaviour that's happened again and again. It might be that someone has bumped someone or pushed someone or been quite physically aggressive to someone, and then what's happened, they instill that fear in them or that sense of power. And the next time they may come and just make a threatening gesture or even just look at a child that makes them afraid that they're going to be hit or pushed around again. So it's that repeated notion of the behaviour that instills fear or causes distress or harm to another child. So this can be physical, verbal or psychological. And again, there is an intent to cause fear, distress or harm to another. It's not accidental. So it's not someone accidentally running into someone or pushing someone in the schoolyard where they didn't necessarily mean to cause them harm. Now, the big difference here, as opposed to other behaviours, is that not only is it repeated, but there is a power imbalance. So it's conducted by a more powerful individual or group against what is perceived to be a less powerful individual. And the reason that this power imbalance exists is that the person who is being bullied is unable to stop it from happening. So it's really not any particular things about the person that makes them less powerful, other than the fact that they lose their sense of power because they're unable to stop it from happening. And so there can be physical power or can be emotional power, but what it establishes here is that the person that's doing the bullying continues to bully, and the person that's being bullied then has less power from that, from their lack of ability to stop it from happening. So when we're talking to younger children, what we talk about is that we talk about the types of behaviours. So it might be that we discuss with them being left out, which is exclusion, being ignored or left out on purpose, threats being made, lies or rumours spread about them, or teasing. Just for your knowledge, still the most common forms of bullying at the moment for all young people is still teasing and verbal abuse, followed by followed by exclusion, so being left out of the friendship group or left out of the group and not allowed to join in. But what we say is that bullying is when these things happen again and again to someone and it's hard for them to stop these things from happening. And we also say that bullying can happen face-to-face or online. So it's a behaviour that usually a child uses to get something that they want, and that can often be attention. It might be to be more popular, but we'll have a look at some of those aspects in a moment. Another definition that we use, and for younger children too, is to break that down. So what does it look like if we look at sort of some of the unfriendly behaviours? Because if you're talking to young children about being friendly, being unfriendly, then it's actually making that definition between being unfriendly, which might be carelessly doing or saying something to someone that might hurt their feelings or hurt them, as opposed to being mean, which is deliberately doing something to be mean on purpose, to hurt someone and upset them or hurt their feelings or hurt them physically. Whereas bullying is when those things happen again and again. So it's on purpose and it happens again and again, and the person that's happening to is unable to stop it from happening. So this is a sort of a breakdown so that you can talk to younger children about, you know, how that level of behaviour can escalate into bullying behaviour. It's really important that you have these discussions and break the behaviour down, because we really want children to know when to seek help, so that they don't get to the point where they can't stop it from happening, but they're not talking about it. If you're talking to older children or to young people, it's a really good idea to not just talk about bullying, but to break out the behaviour so that they can recognise the things that are happening to them. Interestingly, when we do the surveys of young people and we ask children, have you been bullied? They might say, oh, no, I haven't been bullied. But then we would ask them, have any of these things happened to you? So has someone been sent you hurtful messages on a mobile phone again and again? And they would say, yes, that has happened to me. But they don't necessarily draw the parallel because it was one of their friends that was doing it, for instance, and therefore they consider, well, maybe that's not bullying behaviour. In actual fact, we know that within girls' groups in particular, that the bullying is most likely to occur within their friendship groups or within their close peer networks. And so sometimes girls don't recognise that behaviour as bullying behaviour because they think, well, that can't be bullying because it's happening within my own friendship group. And that actually is, you know, really considered to be a relationship problem, but it's also can be bullying behaviours. So at what age does bullying behaviour happen the most? Let's have a look at some of the ages as stages. What we see is that earlier on when children are younger, their perception of what is friendship and social networks is not as well developed. So when they're down sort of in the ages of pre-primary, early childhood, young children, they tend not to use calculated relationships and bullying behaviour. It's more, what we see is more aggressive behaviour, and it tends to be more of a scattered approach. They tend to be more aggressive towards a whole range of other children. So it's fairly rare in the much younger years to see targeted aggression again and again from one child to another or a group of children to another. But not to say that it can't happen, but it happens a lot less. And the time that we see that it really starts to peak, and you can see by this graph, is that around the year 3 up to year 4, 5s, we see an incredible peak in the reporting of bullying behaviours. Now, the reason for this is that this is the time that young people start to ask questions about their social dynamics. They're starting to move into being more independent within themselves and to define who they are. Who am I? What's important to me? And particularly, what other people think of me and where do I fit in? It's also a time when your children will be starting to think about grouping with other children. So not just sort of grouping, not just having lots of friends and playmates, but actually starting to group. And this is where, particularly with girls, there's a lot of jostling to see whether you're going to fit into the popular group or to fit in with the group that you want to be in. And, you know, this can be a really stressful time. Girls groups start to form. They can be quite close-knit. Boys also group, but their groups tend to be a looser connection. That's when we start to see there starts to be issues within the groups, and we start to see that at this time children are very concerned about their identity, about what other children think of them, other children their own age, and also they worry about their friendships. So they start to jostle for positions socially, and this is where, particularly with friendship groups, a child might be feeling that they're worried about being left out of a friendship group, so they might start targeting other individuals in the group to make sure that they're not the one being left out. So they may start to exclude others in the group and get the other children in the group to exclude a person that they think is a bit of a threat to them. And so it goes on. And that's why, you know, when I'm talking to teachers in workshops, I sort of ask them, you know, who are the year 4, 5 teachers in the room? because they're the ones that are sitting right in the middle of this social upheaval that's occurring with young people. And this is why it's so important that around this age we prepare young people for these relationship changes, how to solve issues within your group, also helping them to identify themselves as individuals, because they're starting now at this age to develop the independence about who they are apart from their parents. Now, you'll notice just a moment ago that you saw a little bit of a dive in the graph there. This is data from around Australia, where we see that this peak happens, and then for those schools around Australia that have children that are in primary school up to year 6 level, then we see that it comes down to here. In some states, and Western Australia was in this category not long ago, and we've now transitioned, but schools students went on in primary school into year 7, and you'll see that it would continue to go down at that time. So what we see is that in the primary years, the levels of bullying generally will start to drop down as the children settle into their friendship groups. There's also a leadership component here, that the older children in the school actually get a sense of identity and self-esteem from being the oldest children in the school, sort of like the big fish in the small pond. They're also looked upon as the top of the pile as far as the other children looking up to them, and they do have that sense of self, which helps them in their sense of identity and in their relationships. Then what we see is that in secondary school, we see another peak, and this happens after the transition. And the reason for this that you'll see is that after the transition, most children will go into a much larger secondary school. And even in those schools where they might be kindergarten or prep to year 12, there generally is another intake of students when they transition into secondary school. So even if the children have been in that school all the way through, there's usually more children coming into the mix, into the secondary school, the first cohort starting secondary school. So basically, they've got to go through the whole process all over again, of making friends, of grouping, of finding their identity within the group. So going back to those questions, who am I? Who am I within this group? What is important to me? What do these other people and the new people think of me? And where am I going to fit in with this new group of young people that I'm now in secondary school with? Schools are doing a great job around transition nowadays of actually reducing that peak. So what we're seeing is that there's been a lot of work done socially and emotionally for the young children going through from secondary school into primary school into secondary school, to help them to establish and make those new friendships, build those relationships without having the trauma and upset of the struggles that can come and the resulting bullying behaviours. But it is a time when we have to really watch out for our kids and watch for their vulnerabilities and help them to make those connections and help them to make friends, and also to watch out for any sort of anxiety or stress that might be occurring. These are all natural transitions. If you look at the first one, it's a natural social development with young people, but it's something that we need to be aware of. The secondary one that is after any transition, if the children were then to go on and the young people were then to go on to a different school, for instance in year 12, as we've seen in Tasmania in some of the secondary colleges, then we do see another peak at that time, because they're going through that same process. So wherever there's another transition where they have to regroup and socially it's disruptive, then this will happen. We also then can overlay with that, what about cyberbullying? What happens with that? And what we see is that in general, and these are broad, we're looking at broad data here, so there may be lots of different nuances in the data with particular classes or particular schools, but generally what we see is that the likelihood of cyberbullying will increase with children's access to technology and also their use of social media and gaming platforms. So generally what happens is that that the more they use it, the more likelihood there is that they will engage in or be likely to see or hear about or maybe even experience some bullying online. Now, the important part about this is that we know that most children, in fact 85% of students who bully online also bully offline, and in fact normally they do that first. So they would bully face-to-face first, and then often that leads to cyberbullying or bullying online. So what this tells us is that they really are one and the same, and it's usually the same students who have this need to use bullying behaviour to get what they want, and are perhaps lacking other more positive skills to make their friendship groups, or to push aside people that they are concerned about, that they feel might be more popular. And we're going to have a look at some of those reasons in a moment. But as you can see, the cyber is something that we're very concerned about, sort of particularly up into the secondary arena. So, you know, when we look at the concept of what children are doing online, we're still got vulnerable young people who are going onto social media, and they're still very concerned about forming their identity. It's just that they're doing it in an online platform with lots and lots of other people. And so this is where the pitfalls can come in as to getting into social dilemmas online and social relationship issues online. Now, even though we know that that the face-to-face bullying, you know, if we can get in early and do that, and get in and try and stop the bullying before it goes online, you know, this can be of great benefit. But we also know that cyberbullying, once it gets to that stage, can be a lot more harmful than face-to-face bullying. And I'm sure that you've heard a lot of the reasons around that. Obviously, it's because children can no longer go home from school and get away from it. We know that the most bullying does take place in the school environment, particularly face-to-face, obviously, because this is where children socialise. This is where they see each other. This is where they're together the most. It's no other reason other than the fact that this is where they are together and relating together. We also know that, you know, the severity of bullying online is that it can be broadcast far and wide, and the young people that are having this happen to them really have no idea how far it's gone, how many people have seen it, and this is one of the most stressful things for them. They don't know who else has shared those images, they don't know how far that rumour has spread, etc., as they would with face-to-face. There's also the fact that young people are less likely to talk about it because they worry about having their technology taken away from them. They're worried that they're going to lose their phone. They're worried that they will not be able to use their computer, and of course that, you know, that is a primary reason why they won't be telling parents. So we have to be really careful that we don't give them that message that we will help them to get through this problem without going down that road. We also know that due to being more anonymous online, that children are they're more likely to be a lot more nasty and to be meaner online and say things online that they perhaps wouldn't say face to face. So let's have a look now at why young people engage in bullying. Why do they bully? And we also have a look at why children are bullied. So, and I put all these words here because if you ask young people, why did you bully that person? You know, there could be just all of these different things come out. But the key point about it, you know, that could be that they're more popular, they're popular and therefore they're taking my space, or they're really smart, so, you know, I'm going to pick on them. They're too tall, they're too short, they're too loud, they're too quiet, they're shy, they're alone. There's a lot of different reasons, but basically what it comes back to is the child's need to make a statement by bullying that child rather than a fault of the child that's being bullied. One of the things that we do know, though, is that if a child is seen as someone that probably won't ask for help, or they know that they don't have really close friendship networks that will stick up for them or support them, and they can't stop it from happening, then they are more likely to be bullied than a child that has really tight, close, supportive friendships that will support them and stand up for them. And also we see that children that are alone and sit on the fringes and don't have friendship groups are also more likely to be targeted simply because they are alone and away from the rest of the group. So there are some things that we can look at in that arena as well as we go forward. So why do children bully? Well, generally it's we go back to the majority of the children around those early years, it's because they want to be popular and to be admired. It's what they're worried about. It's that social status. Where do I sit? What do other people think of me? It's often can be jealousy of others. So it's that lack of ability to maintain their emotions and manage emotions. Lack of social skills, not knowing how to be popular and to be part of a group without dominating it or taking control or controlling the group. And also to maintain their sense of self-esteem. We see that often children that bully have they maintain quite a high self-esteem, but only if they continue to have power over others. And if that bullying is taken away from them, often their self-esteem plummets, which is why they keep going back to that behaviour even if they've been punished. We also know that it's that fear of not fitting in, the fear of being left out. So it's almost like a preemptive strike in many cases. Young people will start to leave others out and take control of the group so that they don't get left out. For boys, often around the age of that peak and then into early secondary, we see that they go through quite a lot of physical development as well, and they're quite interested in competition and testing themselves out. So often their bullying can be more around just testing themselves, looking at their sense of power, their strength, their control, and their dominance within a group. So often the boys they don't necessarily have as tight friendship groups as girls, and they're less likely to choose someone within their own group of friends to bully. They're more likely to choose a boy outside of their friendship group that they feel they can have power over, to dominate, maybe even to belittle, to make themselves look more powerful within their peer group. And they'll often say things like, oh, he couldn't take a joke, or, it was just a bit of fun. But they know it's not. They're actually really dominating that person, but they're trying to look more, I guess, powerful within their own friendship group and to be popular. So we see that the social characteristics of why children bully in this group can very much fit back into why children go through that peak into the social development. But there's also a smaller group of young children who are highly aggressive, and that they lack self-regulation and can be very dominant and aggressive within a group. And in many cases, they lack empathy for others and get some sense of self-satisfaction, and in some cases even enjoyment out of dominating, hurting, or threatening another child. So this is a very much smaller percentage of children, but these are often the ones that will go through and continue to bully over time, unless there's some real intervention done with these young people to find out why are they doing this, what do they get out of it, how can we find better behaviours for them, how can we find better ways of them to feel better about themselves, which is why they need more intense work. So let's just have a quick look at some ages and stages and what happens early on. So where do these children come from as far as some of these more aggressive behaviours? What can we do along the way, and how can we make sure that our children don't get caught up in these behaviours? And then we'll have a look after that at what you can do for the children that perhaps have been caught in bullying behaviours, or maybe the targets of bullying behaviours. So the research question that we looked at, when are these children most aggressive? Now, a lot of the work around aggressive looks at older children between the ages of 14 to 24, when children are really sort of getting into that stage of criminal activity and so forth. But we wanted to know early on, when are children at their most aggressive? Why are they aggressive? When do they learn to be aggressive? So if we look at my little niece when she was a tiny preemie baby, we think, what a helpless little thing. But in actual fact, children are at their most aggressive at the age of 18 months old. So those tiny little babies, as they get to toddlerhood, there's definitely a lot of evidence behind the whole the toddlers and the terrible twos and and all of those aspects, because they really are quite dangerous little creatures. However, luckily, because they're small, they have limited access to weapons at this age, they don't actually do too much damage. sometimes mostly to their parents and to their siblings, but generally they have no empathy, they have no control over their emotions. I mean, if they were adult size, we'd have real problems on our hands. But I'm sure that you've all, as parents out there, you've seen how angry and aggressive and the hair pulling and the losing the temper and the tantrums and so forth, they're all part of this process. So we know that children are actually highly aggressive from 18 months of age. And what we see is from some of Richard Tremblay's work that we worked with in Canada, is that children actually become less physically aggressive naturally over time. And if we look at the percentages of physical aggression, we see that there's a whole lot of things coming into play. First of all, they're developing language as well, which really helps. And you'll see that girls' language development starts earlier, and they tend to be able to express themselves more easily and don't get as frustrated with their emotions. We also know that children are learning social skills, so from their parents at home. So that you're teaching them to have restraint, to understand their emotions. You're teaching them the social skills of taking turns and sharing and all of the things that they need to learn, keeping their hands to themselves, things in order that we have that they can actually work cooperatively with other children. Now you'll see around the ages of 5 years of age to 9 years of age, that, sort of the early school years, that boys tend to stay a little bit more aggressive and even just come back up a little bit. And as I mentioned before, this is when they're starting to actually get a little bit more competitive as well and enjoying competition. And they can be more physical at that time, and they enjoy risk-taking physical types of activity. And they do sort of get out there and get sweaty and get out and play physically. And it's a time when they let off a lot of steam, and that's really important for them as well. But you'll see the girls really comes down. But what we need to be aware of is that at this time, we can also see that other more emotional types of aggression, and that during that time when they're getting around the ages of 9 or 10, that we might start to see aggression coming out in different forms, for instance, like more verbal power or more relational type issues. So we also know that some children have much greater difficulty than others, and they may have problems regulating their emotions and their behaviours, and these may be from psychological conditions or behavioural conditions, or they may be simply because they haven't had good role modelling or the beginning development of social behaviours. Now we know that some of these will also go on to take these behaviours into adulthood. So there's a small percentage of children, if they don't receive this good modelling and they don't receive the social skill development and so forth, or they have issues in this area, can go on to have a criminal record or have problems later on, a small percentage. But we also know that those young people that have come from homes where where aggression is used and bullying behaviours are used to solve problems or to manage relationships, that those children are more likely to take those behaviours on with them because they haven't learnt better ways to solve those issues or to get what they want. So it's really important that young children early on learn these behaviours and continue to develop them over time. Self-regulation, all children need to learn to recognise, label and control their emotions from an early age. And I look at this, this meme has been around for a long time, but it sort of brings new meaning when you know that a child of that age is at their most aggressive, and you can say, look, there's a fairly high percentage rate that that child is going to throw that sand at the other child. They have very little empathy at this age, and they're struggling to manage their emotions, so tantrum coming on. We also know that at this point it's important, and this is why schools are really working hard in this day and age to do a lot more work around social and emotional learning in the classroom. We work a lot with schools within our projects to build, areas of self-awareness, self-management, managing those emotions, social awareness, empathy development, understanding relationship skills, how to solve problems, social decision making, making good choices for yourself and others. It's critically important. These skills are so important for all children, because children who have a good basis of these skills make better, healthier choices for themselves going forward. And so, really important that you be aware of these areas and work with your young people around these areas growing up. We also have to remember that they are children, and particularly when we're looking at the primary school age, where they haven't really established these behaviours as a norm yet, that children are going to make relationship mistakes and behavioural mistakes, and therefore we have to make sure that we teach them better ways of doing things. So if they are struggling in relationship issues, or they're engaging in bullying behaviours to get what they want from the relationships, or if they are struggling in relationship issues, then we need to teach them skills, and we need to allow them to practice those skills with other children, rather than just punishment approach. Obviously, if a child is bullying another child, then yes, there are consequences for actions. There should be sanctions on that. But we also need to have a good look and see, why is this happening? What is it that they're trying to get from this behaviour? And what is a more positive way that we can teach them going forward to get what they want in life? We also know that there are some really key features as to why students don't use bullying behaviours, and also why they're not bullied. So we know that most students don't bully others. And so we spoke with some older students around this to find out, what do you perceive it is about yourself that means that you don't engage in bullying behaviours? And also some of the aspects of yourself why you may not have been bullied across time. And the young people said the most common thing that they mentioned was around having good social skills. And so what they said was that they already had friendships, they had a good friendship base, they had healthy relationships, so they didn't need to bully. So I think friendships form a really important place when it comes to either engaging in bullying or being bullied as well. So it's those good social skills. We also know that young people that it's not necessarily going to stop you from being bullied, but we know that children who have good support group networks generally bounce back from it a lot better. They can recover from those experiences a lot better than other children as well. A really important factor for parents is that children, that it's always number one or number two, they say that they think it is wrong. So whether it's drinking alcohol or taking drugs or whatever it might be, it's because their parents would be upset with them, disappointed in them, or angry with them. So it's the moral compass, the family values, so important. Discussing these issues at home. What would you do if this happened? Asking those sort of questions, thinking about solutions to problems, sitting around the dinner table, talking through the scenarios. Have you ever seen this happen? What would you do if that happened to you? Have you seen anything happen like this to someone else? How could you support that person? How would you feel in that situation? These are really important questions. They also feel good about themselves. So they have that feeling that they have a good sense of self, so therefore they don't need to have power over the other people. So it's really important that you help your children to feel that they are special, especially when they're going through this changing time of seeing themselves in the eyes of their peers. But it's still very important that you empower them with feelings of being special, of being and the good things about themselves, that they don't just start focusing on things like just how do I look, or what are people going to think, my peers going to think about my appearance and things like that, which seem to be one of those primary things that they worry about with their peers. Next up, they wouldn't like someone else to treat them that way, and they wouldn't want someone to, they fear that it might happen to them one day. And of course, This one, which I think is just really follows on, that they're too busy to think about it. They're involved in really positive activities, so they don't really have time to engage in bullying. And plus, children that are busy and active and mixing in and out of different friendship groups get to see themselves as in a social dynamic. They meet lots of different people. They have an opportunity to see themselves socially in different dynamics. And generally they don't sit and be thinking and worrying so much about that social dynamic. This is also really important because children who go from one friendship group to another learn to see themselves in different dynamics. Plus, if they're having problems in one social group, say their school friendship group, they can go off with their basketball group or their swimming group or their guitar group or whatever it might be, and get away from that for a while and have time and space to engage in positive relationships with a different group, and it breaks it down. So make sure that you provide opportunities for your children and young people to meet and make new friends outside of their school group, to mix with lots of different groups, develop a sense of belonging to a group, explore themselves in different roles. In one group, they might be more of a leader. In another group, they might just be content to just be part of the group. But it's also, getting them out and about with other groups, it just releases that anxiety that happens within that one friendship group all the time. And children that can move from one group to another generally have much better social skills and are generally sort of adapt to any changes that come, like the transition into secondary school, a lot better. So our protective factors are building their social relationship skills, making sure that you really look at family values and be good role models with the way that you deal with issues and talk it through with young people. Healthy friendship groups and a variety of groups, positive self-esteem and self-identity, helping your young people to label their emotions, identify them, and strategies to manage their emotions. Stress release. I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting jealous. I'm feeling a strong emotion. Taking the time to recognise it and to diffuse it. Getting them out and giving them strategies, counting, relaxing, exercise, whatever works for them to help them to diffuse those emotions before they act on them. And of course, empathy for others, understanding what it might feel like to be in that person's shoes. So how do we respond? I'm just going to finish up with the response. If this happens to your child, now there's a fair likelihood in your child's life that they're going to see bullying happening around them. Children do know when bullying's happening to other children in the school environment, and we hope that bullying doesn't happen for them. But if they do encounter it, then we need to have good responses in place ready and be open and have good communication. A system that we like to use with our families and parents in the school environment is the LATE model. And it's just to help you to sort of think through what are the steps that I need to take. Because if your child comes to you and says, or you recognise some symptoms within your child that they're concerned that they're locking themselves in their room and they're showing levels of anxiety or sadness that you haven't seen before, or they're reluctant to go to school, then we need to respond. I know it hurts, it's painful as a parent. I must say that even my child was bullied when she was younger too. It was a case of exclusion, but I felt it was like a sword to my heart. It's like I failed my child, especially in my role. But these things happen, and there's social relationship dilemmas that we need to work through with them and help them to find a solution and a resolution. So L is for listen, and listening is really important. Let them talk about it. Let them explain to you what's happened. Ask good questions. Ask them how they're feeling about it, what's happened. Get the picture before you react. Remain calm. It's really important that you role model that for them at that time, even though you may be feeling extremely anxious and upset. Acknowledge their concerns and take it seriously. So acknowledge that it's painful. Let them know that it's wrong and it's not their fault, and that you believe them and that they're going to work through the problem. Talk about the options. You know, sometimes your child will just want some support and some help and some advice. They may not want you to jump in straight away and solve the problem, but they would like you to help them to come up with solutions. So talk about the options. Think about, what have you done already to try and stop this from happening? How did that go? What else can you think of that might be helpful? Would you like me to suggest some other things? I think we need to perhaps go and talk to the school. Shall we go and do that? Ask about those sorts of things. Talk about the different options, and then end with encouragement. Remind your child that the bullying is wrong and that you will work together to make the situation better, and that this is the plan, and that you're going to work through strategies, that you are taking it seriously, but we're going to work on it. That also includes going to the school. It's really important that you engage the school. They will want to know sooner rather than later. Sometimes you may find out before they do. That can often be the case, but it's really important that you do this in partnership with the school if things are happening at the school. So, you know, some of the things that you can talk to them about with face-to-face bullying, you know, staying calm, walking away, ignoring it, you know, saying, look, this is bullying, stop, and then walking away, being assertive, but also letting them know it's really important if they can't deal with it, or if they're feeling afraid, feeling threatened, then they should always go and ask for help. Get away and ask for help. If this is online, and we're going to be doing more around this with our team later on this month around cyberbullying as well, but it's really important that they don't respond back, and because that can escalate, just to stop, leave it. If they feel that the person is going to continue this on, and it's, you know, that it's not just within their own friendship group, for instance, someone outside of that, then block the person. Check their privacy settings as well to make sure that other people can't access their sites. Keep a diary of what's happening and when. This is really important, to keep a diary of activities, not just cyber, but face-to-face as well, so that when you go in and talk to the school as well, you can outline what's been happening so they can get a good picture and share what's been happening at school as well. Save the evidence, so screenshots are really important, and report the bullying to the site's service provider to have it removed if it's on something like a social media site. I've put in the website there of that tells you and links you to exactly how to do all of that if you're not sure how to actually contact the site's providers. The eSafety Commissioner's website will take you directly into instructions for that. And of course, let your child's school know, because even if it's cyberbullying, it will be affecting them at school, and it's more than likely there are children involved at the school level. So just to sum up, talk about what bullying is, make sure children know what it is, they understand it, and talk about friendships, friendship issues, sitting around at the dinner table, great time to get together and talk about the friends. Know who your children's friends are, know who they're mixing with, you know, who did you play with at lunchtime today, who are you hanging out with, you know, who are your mates. Get to know them by name, and get to know them over at your place if you can. Help them to build friendships and support their friendships. Let them know that it's always okay to ask for help if they need help. It's not dobbing. If you know, dobbing is deliberately trying to get someone else into trouble. Asking for help is always okay. Keep the lines of communication open, talking with them whenever you can, making sure that they know that you're always there for them, that you're there to support them, you believe in them, and that you're there to help to solve their problems, that you won't overreact and just rush in, that you're there to work it through with them, and discuss how to solve problems as you go along. It's now time we've got a little bit of time to now have some questions and answers from the audience, and I'll be happy to give you as much advice as I'm able to. So I'll hand over for some questions coming in.
Thanks, Erin. That's fantastic. First question we've got tonight is from Alan. What age do you start conversations around bullying? I have a son who is in year 1 at school, and how do you check on them? How frequently?
Okay, so we start to talk about the early ages. We start to talk more around friendly and unfriendly behaviours and getting along with others and so forth. We can use the term bullying, and we do use the term bullying in the schools sector right from the early ages of in kindy and pre-primary, where we talk about when this happens again and again, it's bullying. But it's more discussing the whole concept of social behaviours, getting along with others, friendly behaviours, unfriendly behaviours, are really the important components that we need to talk about early on. But really, as soon as they're starting to go into the social arena, they will start to have children sort of around them where they can have conflicts and aggression and so forth, that is natural and a natural development as they're starting to learn about social behaviour.
Okay, here's one from Paul. It's quite specific. What's the advice when there is a social exclusion happening socially in the school community, with parents practicing social engineering and excluding children from playing as another child is outside their parents' social circles?
Yeah, and obviously, you know, in communities, I mean, schools are social relationship hubs, and that comes from as families as well. And we do see that this can come, it can be quite a common thing for family issues to roll over into the school environment. This is why it's so important that we say that the partnership between schools and families is so critically important, because schools are a hub for families and the community, and these things need to be discussed at the school level. I would suggest that you don't take it on board directly with that family, but that it's just discussed as an issue with the children. Even if there are disputes or problems within families outside of the school, this should not be something that's affecting the children in the school and needs to be dealt with at that level.
Okay, Rodney asks, I've been to my school, but they're not doing anything about it. What should I do?
Okay, and this can be a common question that I'm asked at parent workshops, you know, where we've visited the school, we've let them know that the bullying's occurring, but nothing seems to be happening and it's ongoing. My response to that is that you go back to the school, you keep a diary of the incidents that are happening, remembering that children disclose what's happening in different ways. They may be disclosing to you, you may be seeing it, but it might not be as visible to the teaching staff or to the school. So it's really important that you go back to the school, you explain the incidences that are occurring, and that you work out a plan with the school as to how this is going to be monitored, and that you ask them to do the same, to also watch the behaviours, to keep a record, so that you can both track the behaviours that are going on and the social dynamic that's going on within the school. It's really important to just keep going back and following up. Bullying doesn't just necessarily stop overnight. If a child has a pattern of that behaviour, if they're just punished, for instance, it may have been that that child was punished and or did have consequences for action at the school, but they've now gone back into the behaviour, and they may be doing it in more of what we call a covert or undercover nature, because there'll need to be more work done with that child to change their behaviours other than just the punishment in that case.
Here's one from Simon. My son is being badly bullied but does not want me to go to the school. What should we do?
Yeah, this is another one, particularly with older boys. And the other thing you need to understand is that boys are far less likely to disclose that they're being bullied than girls. They're also far less likely, the older they get, to go to the teachers at the school and tell. They don't want to be seen to be telling or to be disclosing that they're being bullied. So we really have to be careful in the fact that when they do report to you, or you do discover that they've been bullied, that we really are careful how we support them. If a child discloses and that they have let you know that they're being bullied, or you've discovered that they're being bullied, then do go through the process of using the late model and talk it through and explain, you know, and say, okay, what would you like me to help with? What would you like me to do? Now, if your child then spins into a panic and says, don't go to the school and it's going to make it worse, I'm really worried about it, then work through some other strategies that may work for the child. However, I do say
Just bear with us 1 minute while Erin is actually changing to a system where the microphone's working.
Okay, hi everyone. It's Wayne here. I've been asking the questions. We've had a computer glitch on Erin's computer. So Erin's now here, so she'll address the questions directly here. Way you go, Erin.
hello. Okay, where were we up to?
Son is being badly bullied at school but does not want me to go to the school.
Oh yes, so very important that you make a decision when it comes to the time that your child is obviously suffering either physically, emotionally or any form, that you actually will need to at some stage make the choice and the decision to actually go to the school and talk to them about it and seek help. It's really important that you don't just let it go on, and that you will need to say to your child that we will need to go and do this, and we will need to go and talk about it. We can be anonymous. We don't necessarily have to say who the other person is, but we need to go forward and talk to the school to start with and get the ball rolling on fixing this.
Okay, and final question for the night. When and how should we approach other parents?
Oh, if your child is being bullied, it's best not to approach the other parents directly yourself. If it's a situation, and in most cases it is, that's actually a social situation that's happening out in the school environment, it's best to take it up with the school and to sort those relationship issues out with the children. Most bullying issues, especially in the earlier years, actually can be resolved with the children working through building their relationships back up, discussing the issues. A lot of young people don't realise how much pain they're causing the other person, and often when they realise just how bad that is, they'll often change their behaviours. But if we start to then try and take that into our hands with the other parents, it can actually make the situation worse. So in a school dynamic, I would say let's let the school work it out, and they will work with the other parents as well.
Okay, thanks, Erin. And over to you, Liz.
All right, well, thank you again, Erin, very much for tonight and for a very informative session on bullying. It's something that came up in our research that many of our listeners at webinars and podcasts have asked us to cover. So thank you for kicking off the month. And I'd like to mention that we will be running 3 other webinars this month. On the 13th of August with Dr. Jodie Richardson on supporting anxious children. On the 20th of August, Kids Safety Online with Paul Litherland. And on the 27th of August, we will be looking at cyber safety and bullying with Professor Donna Cross. Thank you everybody for attending tonight. Again, thank you very much to Erin Erceg, our Senior Researcher at the Fathering Project. I wish you all a good evening and weekend.